Welcome to This Day in His Story, created by American Heritage Worldwide. A reminder that every day holds something new to learn. Did you know that Ulysses S. Grant became the 18th President of the United States after giving extensive military service? Learn that Grant graduated from West Point Military Academy, served bravely in the Mexican-American War, and became the commanding general of the Union Army during the American Civil War. Discover that a military registrar mistakenly listed Grant's first name as Ulysses instead of Hiram, and that when General Lee surrendered the Confederate Army and ended the Civil War, General Grant generously allowed Lee's men to keep their guns and horses and return home to their farms in time for spring planting.
So imagine the man on the $50 bill for a second. You picture this stoic, bearded face, right? The ruthless general who crushed the Confederacy, the 18th president of the United States.
Yeah, you assume a guy like that was just carved from marble.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like he was born with this innate, predetermined sense of greatness. But today, I want you to imagine that exact same man just a few years before his greatest triumphs, and he is completely broke.
Utterly destitute.
Right. He's in his late 30s. He's working as a clerk in this smelly rural tannery, and he considers himself an absolute undeniable failure.
It is a staggering contrast, honestly. We tend to look at historical monuments and just draw a straight line from the cradle right to the history books.
We really do.
We like our heroes to have a clean trajectory, but when you dive into the actual documents, that straight line just completely shatters.
And that is exactly what we are doing today. Welcome to the deep dive. We are pulling from a really fascinating stack of sources. Today we've got historical biographies, military records, and actually a very specific 2014 devotional address.
A great mix of material.
Yeah, and we're using all of this to piece together the totally chaotic, nonlinear life of Ulysses S. Grant. But our mission today isn't just to, give you a history lesson about the Civil War.
Right.
We are exploring how an unexpected, deeply reluctant individual can be called to massive leadership. And more importantly, how his unpredictable path directly applies to your own future.
Because what's fascinating here is that Grant's trajectory defies every typical destined for greatness narrative that we usually consume.
Totally.
His life is really a masterclass in how unexpected trials, brutal setbacks, and, outright failures are often the exact crucibles needed to prepare us for monumental, unforeseen responsibilities.
Let's start with the boy before the monument then. Because he wasn't even born Ulysses S. Grant, right?
No, he wasn't.
He was Hiram Ulysses Grant, just this remarkably shy, reserved kid growing up in Georgetown, Ohio. And he did not have world domination on his mind at all.
Not even a little bit.
He just wanted to ride horses and absolutely avoid working in his father's tannery business.
Which, if you know anything about tanning hides in the 19th century, is a highly logical motivation.
I can imagine.
Oh, it was a brutal, foul-smelling, physically exhausting industry, and Grant just despised it. In fact, he didn't seek out the military out of some burning patriotic fervor.
Wait, he did?
No, he went to the U.S. Military Academy at West Point at age 17 simply as an escape route. His father was tired of his son's refusal to work in the tannery, so he arranged for him to go.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because his arrival at West Point is really where history gets its first real laugh.
It really is.
He shows up to the academy, and the military registrar makes a clerical error. They mistakenly list his first name as Ulysses instead of Hiram, and then they just invent a middle initial, adding an S.
Just out of nowhere.
Right. And instead of correcting the record, this shy teenager just accepts it. I mean, Hiram Ulysses Grant became Ulysses S. Grant forever, simply because a guy with a pen wrote it down wrong.
It speaks volumes about his personality at the time, honestly. He wasn't the type to demand the world bend to his identity.
He didn't want to make a fuss.
Exactly. He didn't have a massive ego. He just adapted to the situation directly in front of him.
And his actual time at West Point was just as contradictory as his name. I was looking through his academic records and our sources, and he was brilliant at mathematics, geology, and predictably, he set records in horsemanship.
He was an incredible writer.
But he was constantly getting demerits. He was cited for tardiness, for sloppy dress. It really makes me think of that brilliant but entirely disorganized college roommate you might have had.
Oh, absolutely.
You know the one, right?
Yeah.
The guy who shows up to finals in pajama pants 5 minutes late, but still somehow manages to pull an A in calculus.
That is a perfect comparison. He had the intellect, but his disdain for the superficial aspects of military life was profound. There's a specific visceral hatred he had for his West Point uniform that really captures this mindset.
Oh, the quote about the uniform, yes.
Yeah, to quote him exactly from his own writings, he said, "My pants set as tight to my skin as the bark to a tree. If you were to see me at a distance, the first question you would ask would be, is that a fish or an animal?"
A fish or an animal. That is incredible.
It is, but it's also incredibly revealing. This isn't just a teenager complaining about itchy wool. It reveals a man who is deeply, fundamentally uncomfortable with military pomp and circumstance.
Right. He hated the pageantry.
He hated it. And that deep discomfort with how the military looked completely defined how he operated once he was actually deployed. He didn't care about the image. He only cared about the underlying reality of the work.
Which takes us right into his early military career. So after he graduates, he's stationed in St. Louis, Missouri. The Mexican-American War breaks out. He serves under General Zachary Taylor and Winfield Scott.
He does.
But again, he's not the guy leading glorious cinematic cavalry charges with his sword drawn. He was assigned as the quartermaster.
And that role, the quartermaster, is the absolute crucible of his strategic genius.
Really, a desk job.
It sounds like a desk job, sure. But as a quartermaster, you are entirely focused on logistics. You oversee the movement of supplies, the food, the ammunition, the transport.
Right, because you can have the bravest soldiers in the world, but if they don't have boots or beans, you lose the war.
Exactly. There is an old military adage, amateurs talk tactics, but professionals talk logistics.
I love that.
While other officers were focused on the glory of the battlefield and seeking promotions, Grant was quietly observing military maneuvers from a foundational level.
He was learning how the machine actually runs.
He learned how to sustain an army over vast, hostile territories. He learned that war is actually won in the gritty, unglamorous reality of supply lines.
But even as he's building this incredible logistical foundation, his personal life starts falling apart, right?
It does. The military life is relentless.
He marries Julia in 1848. They start having children. But by 1852, he is assigned to remote posts on the West Coast. Travel back then meant he was entirely separated from his family.
For long stretches of time.
The isolation just breaks him, and ultimately he walks away.
Yes, the historical record shows he resigned his commission from the Army on July 31st, 1854. He steps away to be a family man.
Which is a noble pursuit.
It is. But the transition to civilian life is absolutely brutal for him.
Because he goes back to Missouri, and he just fails. He tries farming, he tries real estate, he tries debt collection. Nothing works.
Nothing sticks.
And here is where his story hits rock bottom. The future commander of the Union Army, the man whose face will be printed on millions of $50 bills, has to take a low-level job working as a clerk. And where is he working? In his father's tannery business in Galena, Illinois. The exact foul-smelling fate he tried to escape when he was 17 years old.
It is the ultimate irony. He has come full circle right back to the hides.
It's wild to think about.
If you were analyzing his life in 1860, you would definitively conclude that he was a man who had peaked early and faded into total obscurity.
But history didn't stop in 1860. Because in 1861, Confederate troops attack Fort Sumter. The Civil War begins.
The spark that changed everything.
That single event changes the trajectory of the nation, and it pulls Grant right out of the tannery.
He volunteers for the Union, and suddenly, those exact skills he built in obscurity become vital.
The logistics.
Yes, the logistics expert, the man who understands supply chains and quiet endurance, rises through the ranks incredibly fast. This former clerk ends up engineering these massive, monumental victories for the Union at places like Vicksburg, Chattanooga, and Shiloh.
Okay, hang on. I'd have to push back here for a second. Grouping Shiloh in as just a monumental victory feels a bit clean, doesn't it?
How do you mean?
Well, when you look at the history, wasn't Grant facing intense calls for his resignation after Shiloh due to the sheer human cost?
That is entirely fair, and you're right to pull that out. The victory at Shiloh came at an unimaginable price.
The numbers are horrific.
We are talking about staggering casualties. Our sources cite 23,746 deaths, wounded and missing combined, and a massive portion of those were Union soldiers. The public outcry was deafening. People were calling him a butcher.
I mean, how does a leader even process being responsible for that kind of catastrophic loss of life?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we see the agonizing burden of high command. Grant understood the horrific math of the Civil War.
A brutal reality of it.
Yes. He realized, perhaps sooner than anyone else, that this was not a war of gentlemanly maneuvers that would end with a swift treaty. It was a war of brutal attrition.
Wow.
The criticism at Shiloh was intense, but Grant possessed a grim, unshakable resolve to see the conflict through to its necessary end. He was willing to bear the unbearable weight of those casualties to save the Union.
He took on the burden no one else wanted.
Exactly. And that precise resolve is why President Abraham Lincoln gave General Grant command of the entire Union Army on March 10, 1864. Lincoln famously said of Grant, "I can't spare this man, he fights."
Lincoln needed someone who wouldn't flinch. And within a year, that grim determination paid off. Confederate General Robert E. Lee surrenders his Army of Northern Virginia to Grant, effectively ending the Civil War.
A monumental moment.
And the visual of this surrender at Appomattox Courthouse is just stunning. It's like a movie scene. You have General Lee arriving in full, pristine military dress, every brass button polished, wearing an immaculate sash and ceremonial sword.
The very picture of a general.
Right. And in stark contrast, you have Grant arriving in a well-worn, muddied field uniform.
It brings us right back to the West Point cadet who hated his tight pants, doesn't it?
It really does.
Grant was never about the image. He was about the reality of the work. And you see that same focus on reality over optics in how he handled the actual peace agreement. He wasn't there to humiliate a defeated enemy.
Right. He wrote the terms of surrender himself, and they were incredibly generous. The Union took no Confederate prisoners. They claimed no private property.
None at all.
Instead, Grant explicitly allowed Lee's men to keep their guns and their horses.
And the reason he gave for letting them keep the horses is so profoundly human.
What was it?
He said they would need them for the spring planting.
Wow. That's amazing.
He wasn't looking at them as enemy combatants anymore. He was looking at them as fellow countrymen who needed to feed their families next year. It was a profound act of healing.
And it is terrifying to think how close the nation came to losing him right after this massive triumph.
Yes, the sliding doors moment.
There's an incredible sliding doors moment just days later. Grant was actually invited to be at Ford's Theater with President Lincoln on the night Lincoln was assassinated.
He was scheduled to be in the presidential box.
But instead of going to the play, Grant and his wife chose to travel to New Jersey to see their children. That simple, fatherly decision to prioritize his kids over a social event literally saved his life.
And because he survived, and because he had won the war, the fragile nation suddenly needed him to lead in peace.
Which was a messy time.
Extremely. Following Lincoln's death and the messy impeachment of President Andrew Johnson, the country was tearing itself apart again. So in 1868, at the age of 46, Ulysses S. Grant is elected President of the United States.
He was universally revered as an honest man, the savior of the Union. But we have to remember, he had absolutely zero prior political experience.
None. He had never held public office.
So what does this all mean for how he actually governed? It's like asking a world-class chef to suddenly run a corporate boardroom, right? The skills don't necessarily translate seamlessly.
That's a great way to put it.
Grant presided over the federal government in the exact same way he ran the Union Army. He appointed a massive number of former military men to serve on his White House staff because a strict chain of command was the only leadership structure he knew.
And while his administration certainly faced structural challenges and scandals due to that lack of political experience, he achieved monumental victories for civil rights.
He really did.
President Grant worked fiercely to protect the rights of newly freed slaves by signing and enforcing the 15th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution.
A huge milestone.
It was a landmark piece of legislation that guaranteed the right of men to vote regardless of their race or color. And he used the federal government to actively crush the Ku Klux Klan during his tenure.
It's an incredibly brave legacy. But as we look at his post-presidency years, the story takes a really heart-wrenching turn.
It does. It's tough to read.
After retiring from public life, he became a partner in a Wall Street financial firm, hoping to secure his family's wealth. But his partners were running was essentially a massive fraud. They swindled investors with faulty loans.
And by 1884, Grant goes completely bankrupt.
Completely broke again.
The hero of the Republic, the two-term president, was left utterly destitute, struggling to even pay his grocery bills.
And as if the financial ruin wasn't enough, he is simultaneously diagnosed with terminal throat cancer. He is quite literally dying while watching his family face total poverty.
It's a devastating situation.
So he embarks on one final, desperate campaign. Grant begins writing his personal memoirs. It was a race against death.
It was a heroic, agonizing final act. He was in excruciating pain, eventually unable to speak at all. He was just scribbling his memories on notepads, wrapped in blankets on his porch.
And he finishes those memoirs just days before he dies.
And it was a staggering success. Ultimately, his published autobiography, which was championed by Mark Twain, earned his family nearly $450,000.
Which was a fortune back then.
In today's money, that would be the equivalent of about $10 million. He secured their future with his pen long after his sword was put away.
It's an overwhelming, exhausting story of resilience, and this is exactly where we want to pivot to bring this massive historical epic right into your living room or your car or wherever you are listening to this right now.
Right to you.
Because Ulysses S. Grant, as a young boy hiding from the tannery in Ohio, did not know he would lead the Union Army. He did not know he would write the terms of surrender at Appomattox or become the president.
Exactly. And just like Grant, you do not know what lies ahead for you.
You really don't.
You don't know what specific trials, detours, or unexpected twists are waiting to forge you into the leader you are required to become. But unlike Grant in his youth, you have explicit guidance from church leaders about what the Lord has in mind for your future.
That's right. And this isn't vague, generalized encouragement. This is a factual, prophetic promise. I want to read directly from a devotional for young adults given by Elder M. Russell Ballard on May 4, 2014.
A very powerful address.
Listen to the absolute certainty in his words. He said, "I want you to know that the Lord loves you and trusts you. Let me repeat and emphasize that point. You will lead the church in 20 to 30 years from now."
And he gets incredibly specific about what that leadership looks like. This raises an important question. How are you preparing for that certainty today? Because Elder Ballard goes on to outline a demanding future.
All right, he continues the quote saying, "Some of you will serve as bishops, stake presidents, mission presidents, primary young women, and Relief Society presidents, and temple presidents and matrons. Yes, within the reach of my voice tonight are those who will most likely become leaders in communities and nations of the world."
Serving as a bishop, a Relief Society president, or a community leader, these are roles that require the exact kind of quiet resilience we saw in Grant.
Absolutely.
They require the ability to handle complex logistics, to bear heavy emotional burdens, and to lead with profound empathy for people who are struggling.
Like letting the soldiers keep their horses.
Exactly. Grant's unexpected rise from a reluctant quartermaster who hated the spotlight to a decisive leader bearing the weight of a fractured nation is the exact template for the forthcoming responsibilities you will shoulder.
It really puts our own struggles into perspective. Grant's journey from a muddy quartermaster embarrassed by his own uniform, to a victorious general making the horrific calculations of Shiloh, to a dying man securing his family's survival with a pen, teaches us that great leaders are almost always forged in obscurity.
They really are.
They're built in the moments when they feel like they're failing at the tannery.
They are built through quiet, unglamorous endurance. The monument comes much, much later. And speaking of monuments, Grant's 150-foot-high tomb in New York City stands as a permanent testament to that endurance.
It's massive.
It is. And in 1902, his beloved wife Julia died and was finally buried right next to him.
After all those years of military deployments keeping them apart, they're finally together. And the engraving on that massive tomb is so remarkably simple yet so profound given the sheer scale of the blood and war he waded through. It just reads, "Let us have peace."
It's a beautiful distillation of a chaotic life. And it leaves us with a lingering thought for you to carry forward today.
What's that?
Well, we've explored the hidden potential inside unexpected leaders and the prophetic promises made about your own future. So what do you think you might do in the future? And more importantly, when the moment comes, regardless of your current circumstances or how unprepared you might feel, are you willing to serve the church, your community, and your country?
It all comes back to that contrast we started with, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The perfectly carved marble monument versus the messy, unpredictable, sometimes deeply muddy reality of the person who actually lived the history.
That's exactly it.
You don't have to be carved from marble to change the world. You don't even have to have your life perfectly put together right now. You just have to be willing to answer the call when it comes, even if it's taking you down a path you never planned for. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep learning, keep questioning, and keep preparing for your own calling.
Thank you for joining us for this day in His story. May the lessons of yesterday inspire you to see God's hand today and to play your part in His story now. For more faith-based learning, visit ahsworldwide.org, the homeschool for faith and family.